What's up, YouTube? Welcome to my channel. Just out in the car in the Challenger, cruising around, cruising Telegraph on a Friday afternoon, and we're coming up on one of my favorite spots. Blue hoops in the back, in the distance there. That's the call it the football bridge, because it was built for the Super Bowl a few years back. So what's really cool about this bridge is that it's really big and really loud underneath. So we're gonna go underneath it and make some noise. See, I'm not the only one who had this idea. Got a little pop out of that one. So right now I'm cruising through the town of Wyandotte, and I don't know if you guys are interested in, but I'm interested in history and stuff like that. So this road that we're on, West Jefferson, basically follows the original road, that, like the original Michigan road. Like, this is the very first road in Michigan. This was a trail that they used for the expansion. There's like some smoke up there. So during the War of 1812, right along this road were a couple of large battlefields. Not quite sure where the actual battlefield sites are, because the next town we're going to go through, most of the sites are buried under modern housing and stuff like that. But this is the original road that was the main artery for people coming to settle Michigan. And it's also known as Hull's Trace, because somewhere during the War of 1812, General Hull expanded this road and built it up some as part of trying to get supplies back and forth during the War of 1812. But yeah, he wasn't real successful with that, but he did widen this road and stuff like that. So we'll just keep cruising down the road and see what we see. So now I'm in the village of Trenton, which is where a couple of the battles took place. Although it wasn't called Trenton at the time, Trenton was established much later on. Right here in Trenton we have the remains that are being torn down as we speak of the McClue steel plant. You may not know it, but the production of steel, at least the modern kind of steel that we use today, basically started in this region of Michigan, both here and in Wyandotte that we just came from. The first Bessemer style steel mills were built here before steel production moved to other parts of the country. But this has been standing for a long time, and they just recently started tearing this down. So we're getting a look at what's left. Big old crane, I think, and a bunch of rubble. So as we roll into Trenton proper, somewhere around here was where the Battle of Maguaga, if I'm pronouncing that right, was fought. It's buried somewhere in this historic town here, because this town pretty much sprang up right after the War of 1812 ended. So a lot of the houses on this road are 1862, 1842, and stuff like that. But the Battle of Maguaga was where they were trying to get supplies from Ohio for Fort Detroit, and the troops that were in Canada at the time. Get through a couple gears here. So this was their second attempt to come down this road, and they ran right into the British and their native allies and actually beat them. despite the fact that they were surprised upon as they were bringing supplies through here, or actually trying to go south to gather supplies. But somewhere during the battle, the two divisions of American troops got separated, as the troop following the Native Americans went, I think, westward, and the group following the British went south along this road here, until they came to a point where they decided that it wasn't safe to separate their forces, and instead of having a decisive American victory, the British escaped, the Native Americans escaped, and the war continued on. So I can't be sure exactly, but I think the battle was right around here somewhere. I'm thinking Maguaga was probably on this little island that we're going to, Elizabeth Park, or at least nearby to it. But the road probably cut somewhere to the east where I am now, before heading further south. But it pretty much follows the water at all times, the Detroit River or Lake Erie, as it continues on down the road. So we're gonna hit up this park. This is just a cool park to cruise around, and wow, is it ever busy today. So much for social distancing, right? So yeah, I thought I was gonna come park down by the river and get some cool pictures, but there's too many cars today. So yeah, right around here, the sign was for the Battle of Maguaga was right back there. Yeah, there's nothing to see. So now we're officially back on the road. Hall's Trace Road, also known as West Jefferson down here, where it resumes pretty much its original course. And we have a wildlife refuge over there. And lots of conservation efforts for the nature and stuff like that. But as far as the actual War of 1812 sites and the sites of the original Native American villages and stuff like that, that's all pretty much gone. So the next spot we're about to pass is the site of the Battle of Brownstown. Brownstown is one of the original 5 or 6 townships in Michigan. It is the township in which I live. Is this the creek right here? No, this is like a little pond. But anyway, it's one of the original 5 or 6 communities in Michigan, and it's where a couple of the battles took place. Yeah, we're there. So that was the Brownstown Creek back there. The original village of Brownstown was right in this area, so I'm thinking it was over there somewhere. But this big river here, during the first attempt to go to Ohio to gather supplies for Fort Detroit, as it came down this road, although I don't think they came right down the road, I think they probably tried to cross somewhere upstream here, but over there was the village of Brownstown, and it got its name because somewhere in Ohio, a child was abducted during an Indian raid on an early American settler village, and they took this man whose last name was Brown. So they took Mr. Brown from his family. He must have been 8 years old, and they raised him, and eventually, he became fully nativized, or whatever you want to call it, and married a native woman, and the village was eventually named after him. So that's why it's called Brownstown Village, although currently it sits in Gibraltar Township. So it's weird how they redistricted it, despite how how important the name Brownstown really is. So back to the War of 1812. So the troops are coming south from Fort Detroit, and at the time there are of course no bridges or stuff or anything like that. So they tried to cross this river here, and they were about halfway across it when the Native Americans and the British from Brownstown Village here, or Brownstown Township, whatever you want to call it, when they spotted them trying to sneak past. That's why I think they were upstream somewhere. So they were attacked midstream, and it's not a shallow stream really. So as they were crossing it, they were attacked and had to run all the way back to Detroit, which led to a lot of confusion as to how many people were killed in the Battle of Brownstown. I think the official figure somewhere in the hundreds, but what happened was, during the mad flee back toward Fort Detroit, they obviously didn't take the road, so they ran through the woods. So a lot of that, 100, 200 of, casualties actually were people who were just lost in the woods and eventually did show up. So the actual number of people killed in this attack is really unknown. We'll mention I came down here with a buddy, and we did some metal detecting on the site, at least that site that way. This is the middle school over here, and we went that way into the woods up to the bank of the creek, which honestly, if we were trying to look for War of 1812 stuff, we were on the wrong side of the creek. But we did find like an old home site right on the side of the water there. But somebody had obviously been there before us and had dug a lot of the relics up and just left them beside a tree. So that's how we know somebody was there before us. So I'm standing here on the side of West Jefferson. This park that I parked at is called Hull's Trace. So they marked this particular park Hull's Trace because this is where Hull picked to cross the Huron River, both branches of it. You can see the river here. And how he did it was he built what they call a corduroy road. So corduroy road is where you lay a bunch of logs flat, maybe throw some earth on top of it to make a road or make a bridge. So this corduroy road is pretty much basically what I'm standing on right now. When the river and lakes are lower, because they're at record highs right now, but when they're lower, you can actually see some of the original wood that he built his corduroy road with on the banks of this river here. So we're gonna just walk along it and see if we can actually see some of these logs he laid out. This intersection here, Jefferson and Harbin Drive, this is where I should be able to see the corduroy road, but the lake level is definitely way too high. You can barely see any water underneath that bridge, and you can see these actual trees that stick out here. Now those trees are on the edge, and the actual corduroy road should stick off the side of that. So between that and the natural colors of the water, there's not a chance we're going to actually get a look at the original corduroy road. But hey, we had a fun drive. So all right, well, we walked both sides of this thing. Didn't see any of the original timbers, but it's to be expected. So I'm walking back to the car, and we'll get a look at the actual sign since I'm on foot. Well, according to that sign, General Hull came up before the war actually broke out in the upcoming months, and was eventually trapped in Detroit. There was another general that was at Fort Detroit, and he had made an excursion over into Canada and took several British villages in Canada. But because of the supplies being cut off on this road, eventually Hull had to surrender Detroit. And we eventually got that back at the conclusion of the war, just as the territories we had taken from the British were eventually given back to the British, and eventually that would eventually become Canada. So that's all. I'm going to take you as far south today. I think I'm going to go back north, and we're going to explore around the village of Brownstown, the current roads, and see if we can see some kind of spot where we might be able to metal detect sometime later. So as I said before, this area is now part of Gibraltar. There's the memorial for the Battle of Brownstown. So Brownstown Village was on the side of one of these banks here, where downtown Gibraltar now stands. So I've never really cruised through Gibraltar before, despite living so close. So I'm just cruising through and seeing what's here. Didn't mention it before, but one of the big problems that one of the big mistakes that Hull made building that road was that at no point was it ever more than a mile from either the Detroit River or Lake Erie or any of that. So it was always vulnerable to British attack, specifically because the British had control of the Great Lakes at that point. And I think they only had the one ship in there, but it was more than enough to be dominant. Wow, look at this thing. Anyway, so that one ship was enough that they had supremacy over the waters, so that we had, the Americans had no defense on the water. So with the road being just a mile from Lake Erie here, so take a right-hand turn and it's a dead end. Anyway, but because this road is so close to the water, at any point the British could just row a canoe over here and attack. And whenever they were in danger, like when they got caught with their pants down during the Battle of Maguaga, all they had to do was simply grab their stuff, hop back on their canoes, go back across the water. Well, I was planning on closing out my day with a trip to Long John Silver's, but this being Friday in Lent, the line is out to the road. So yeah, so I'm gonna have to make my own Lenten meal. That's pretty much gonna be all of it for today. Thanks for watching. If you like this, give me a thumbs up. Let me know if you'd like to see more, and I'll continue this with the rest of the stuff down the Michigan Mother Road there. So like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. As you can see, I have lots of problems with traction on the street. Plus anything below second gear, it takes me a minute to get going, but once I get going, this thing's a rocket ship. As the driver of that Z28 just found out.